personal finance because it's a touchy topic. And it's a touchy topic. And so just showing up, kudos to you guys for being willing to have the conversation, because that goes a little against the grain for those of us who were raised in the Midwest. Just learned a new statistic recently that 50%, although we women are just over 50% of the population, only 15% of the professionals in the wealth management field are women. So we have a lot of ground to make up. One of the first questions people ask me when I say that I wrote a book called A Girl's Guide to Personal Finance is, why did you focus on girls? And I find that interesting. So the first get out of the way is that all money concepts are money neutral. Fortunately, the color green is a perfect color because money is neutral. And it just matters whose name's on the account, right? So, but the reason I focused on women is because I wanted to make it interesting, and I wanted it to be something that a young professional like my daughter would actually read. So that's the only reason it's focused on women. All the facts are the same. It's gender neutral, and I've had good reviews from men as well. So I want to get that one out of the way. So like a lot of people, I learned some of my most valuable life lessons working my way through college. Specifically, I was a waitress at the Minneapolis International Airport. This was a really good gig for me because you could make some reasonable tips. And in college, I was covering my expenses. This wasn't money to have a little spending money for the weekends. This was making sure I could pay the rent, cover my car insurance, food, all of that. So this income was really important to me. And I tried to learn how to do my job best so that I could maximize I was earning. So I learned, after got the basics of the job down, that if I walked in, I'm thinking goal oriented. All right, I need to make X amount so I can, get rent next week. And whenever I walked in and that was my focus for my shift, I inevitably was disappointed. I don't know why. It felt like I was doing all the right things, but I was disappointed. Then I started walking in and going, okay, no matter how much I make, I'm just going to be the best waitress I can be. And inevitably, I walked out with full pockets. And I don't know exactly what it was, but somehow my actions, I think were the same, but my interactions with people must have been different because I was compensated more when I didn't focus on the money. So as we all know, this was 30 years ago, but we've all learned mindset's a big thing. And lots of researchers have confirmed all of that. But the other thing I realized was there was another factor that I couldn't control. And that was the emotions of the people I waited on. I would serve different tables, the exact same thing for the exact same price with all the exact, finesse, if I had any. Yet I would get compensated very differently. And a lot of it had to do with their mood. I had vividly remember one table of young men who were on their way for a group vacation. They must have attended college or something together, and they were going to go off for a bachelor party. They were the happiest campers in the world. Their vacation started the minute they hit the airport, and I was the beverage goddess. All I had to do was walk to their table and bring them the high-priced beer that we served. They thought I was a rock star. I was compensated very well by them. The table next to them, similar young professional men, they just lost a big account. I was bringing them what they needed to help smooth off the edges and help them feel better. I was not nearly compensated as well. My attitude was the same. My mindset, everything else was the same. So mindset got to do with it, but it's also emotions that we have to control, and they can hijack us. Another example where that comes together, the mindset and the emotions, is senior pictures when I was buying them for my son. So one of the places where a lot of people overspend, and I'm in this camp, is with our kids. And I have always been a very pragmatic, practical person. But when it came to getting senior pictures, my daughter I was very practical, had a great studio do them, but I got the base package. They were all wonderful. It was great. 2 years later, my son was a senior, and the whole empty nester syndrome really started to kick in for me strong. My mindset when I went to the studio to pick out those pictures was the same. I'm going to get the base package, not overspend on this, be practical about it. I get into the studio and the same woman is showing me all the pictures and how they look in the frames and all of this. And my emotions hijack me. I could not buy enough photos. They could not be big enough, no matter what I did, knowing I was totally overspending. But all the emotions of empty nesting and my son moving off to college just derailed me. And I probably spent what I had, well, maybe not triple, but a lot more than what I had on my daughter just 2 years earlier. So mindset's great, but emotions can hijack us, especially in sensitive situations. So to help moderate that and to keep those things in check, one of the tricks I do is I keep this sentence in mind and I finish it for myself. And I've used this for a lot of others. So grab a pencil and a piece of paper, or just use the computer that's in front of you and finish this sentence. I will manage my money today so I can. And whatever the answer is for you, fill that in. I will manage my money today so I can. I did this I've done this at a lot of different presentations, and I love hearing what people's I can is. I hear with the young people, so I can get out of debt, so I can graduate from college, so I can start my own business. Anybody willing to share what theirs is? Willing to unmute and tell us what your I can is?
I was maybe somewhat generic and just said retire. Maybe because I just met with my financial planner, but my husband's a little bit older than I am. And so I'd love to retire the same time he does. If I can just get 8 more years, of savings, then maybe I can retire the same time as him. So that is my goal.
Yay. And I think retirement has a different perspective. When they first set the retirement age of 65, the average life expectancy was 67. And now we're living longer, but have better health so we can do more with that retirement and share it with the people who we love. Anybody else willing to unmute and tell us what their I can is? All right. Well, retirement is actually one of the most common ones. I look at it as having that choice. So sometimes it's having the choice to make a big move. I saved a lot of money early in my career. I worked for a financial institution, so I decided I should try to take the advice that we gave to a lot of people. And doing that early in my career allowed me to make a career move that was important given where my life was a number of years ago. So it's having choices of a lot of different things. So thank you, Amy, for sharing that. So one of the reason why I think it's important for us to have in mind what our I can is because it's hard. And managing money for the sake of managing money is not motivating. And it certainly isn't going to help you when one of those emotional hijack things come along. So one of the things I've been doing is talking to a lot of college students since I've done my book. And what I have found is, and I've talked to a number of groups, and it's interesting. I have a lot of what I'll call baby boomers saying, well, the problem is they're just not teaching financial literacy in schools anymore. They're teaching all that high-end algebra. And what I have found is that's actually not the case. We can't blame educators for this. It's changed. When I was growing up, the landscape for finance was easier. One, you didn't have as many institutions borrowing as much money. Predatory lenders back in the day were called loan sharks, and it was illegal. Now there's a lot of institutions where they will loan you money, but you will they will also own you in the process. The industry has shifted a ton in the last 30 years. It's hard for people in the financial industry to keep up, let alone educators to keep up. It's also gotten more complicated, and our society has gotten far more consumer focused than it was even a few years ago. Now, you guys, most of you are in retail in one way or another, so you probably understand this more than ever. There's a million tricks that are put in place to get people to make that buying decision, especially an impulse buying decision. You know, the candy right at the checkout counter, right at the level of all the kids so they can grab it on the way. One of my biggest struggles as a parent was getting the kids out of there without a handful of candy or a huge tantrum in the process. So it's always been hard. But then as I've talked to college students, it's gotten even harder because we've gotten all those tricks. Now, the college students or the younger population, it's not just hard like it was when I was growing up, but it now looks like a ninja warrior scene. Not only do you have to go over the same obstacles of getting a loan, paying back things, having a good credit score, all the things that make up our finances, but there's all this huge distractions that go with it. So they need more skills than what they ever did. So the boomers just saying they need to teach that. It's much more complicated than that. It's like an American Ninja Warrior set, and these poor young people are trying to navigate that. Half of navigating that is just getting rid of the distractions. Again, in retail, you guys know this, the milk is in the very back of the store so that we are forced to walk by aisles of Halloween candy on our way to get what we actually need. So the young people have it harder, and I think all of us do, not to mention the misinformation and the onslaught of advertising and social media. It just really pours fuel on that same fire. Now, the good news is we have abundance of economic power. Women in particular, I think the pandemic has shown this and highlighted it even more. It has highlighted the value of our unpaid contributions, the value of our caretaking for our children, for our elderly, for a lot of the things we do for our community. There's a big value in that, and our society has suffered when we haven't been able to do some of that caretaking, or it's been limited. It's also highlighted our paid contribution. Women have been hit the hardest. In our area, but in most of America, unemployment is very low. And the biggest complaint by employers and what's limiting our economy from soaring even more is getting enough people in jobs and working. So as a consequence, wages are going up. So our paid contributions that we contribute are huge. And that contribution, that income that we gain, is then fueling another economic power, and that's our power to spend. If we chose to stop wearing makeup, even for a few days a week, industries would come to their knees. It's amazing the amount of money that we fuel the system. It is projected that women alone influence 78% of all discretionary income. And then, of course, we influence a lot of the non-discretionary income. So our economic power is amazing. Add to that our ability to influence others based on our knowledge. So when I was growing up, a lot of my knowledge on income in that, or finances in general, came from my mother and my grandmother. They understood how things work. They influenced me and taught me a lot of valuable lessons. Well, now, I saw a situation where this was knowledge and influence played a big role. So I know a number of business owners.
I'm in a webinar.
And one of them has been very successful. And this man has built a huge business. And the men in his family have come to him with business ideas, and he has supported them, financially supported him, put his clout and wherewithal behind them, and they've been very successful. Well, a couple years ago, his daughters came to him with this business idea. They saw a need. They developed a plan to use one of their assets that was underutilized and how it could be better utilized for a need that was in the market, and pitched it to their father. And he poo-pooed the idea, really wasn't behind it. And his wife just leaned over and said, "Dear, you've always supported the boys. You need to support your girls." And right there, hundreds of thousands of dollars were unleashed. And the ripple effect of that is huge. And it was because one woman just said, "Dear, you need to support the girls." And it's those things that we can influence in a little way, in addition to our spending and our paid contribution and our unpaid contributions, make a huge difference. On top of that, there's our giving. There's the PTO and the Girl Scout cookies and all of that, and taking dinners to our neighbors. But on top of that, it's the checks we write. I'm involved in a group called Ankeny, 100 Women Who Care in Ankeny. And we get together 4 times a year. There's about 100 of us, and we have local charities come in and pitch like a Shark Tank, but they're a charity that has an immediate need in our area. And then we vote on which one wins. And then everybody in the room writes a check for $100 directly to that charity. So once a quarter, $10,000 goes directly to a local charity by 100 women getting together. That's power that uses our knowledge, our influence, and our giving to make a big impact locally. So let's use that economic power. So this is the big equation and the big scoreboard of personal finance. You do not need advanced math to do personal finance. It is income minus expenses, gain or loss. That's the vast majority of it. There's some addition, subtraction, multiplication. That's it. And beautiful thing is our calculators on our phones can do all of the math for us. So we really have no excuse. The other thing that I have seen repeatedly throughout my life, mostly with personal examples, is, but then you see it in the news with big stars. Kanye West is one that comes to mind. He made a ton of money, but was broke. This happens over and over, and it's very clear. It's not about how much money you're making. Yes, it helps to have more, but it's more about how much you're keeping and saving for yourself and using to get yourself ahead versus somebody else. So it's really focused. We can have a big impact focusing on what we're doing with the money we have. So this is an example I like to use. It's a little bit like that, HGTV, which, one factor's best. So we have Ashley and Maddie. Ashley saved $5.50 a day, saved it a total of $40,000 over 20 years. Her total after at the very end was $300,000. Maddie, she saved twice the amount per day, total of twice amount, but the total value was $226,000. So significantly less than what Ashley did. So the one question is, what was the difference? How is it that Ashley saved half of what Maddie did, but ended up with more? She didn't flip a house. This was just savings. Any guesses?
Time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's in the headline. Put time on your side. It's about putting the money away and letting it be. And time just compounds it all for them. And it's one of the beautiful things. Albert Einstein called it the 8th wonder of the world. And those who knew and took advantage of it would profit from it. And those who didn't, it would be used against them. So the key is time. And yes, it's like a tree. I always want, the best time to plant one is 20 years ago. But I say that not to say, oh, you should have done it before. But if you haven't, or you've been doing it, but would like to do more, today is always the best day to get that started because it will work in your favor later on. So that Amy's example, if the motivation is to be able to retire with her husband in 8 years, boy, now's a great time to be doing everything you can so that you can make that a reality. Sorry to put extra pressure on you, Amy. So you guys will have probably in retail might know this better than anybody, but there's an onslaught of ads about what's in your wallet and which cards give the best perks and how many miles you can get on them and all of that. And my big question is, how are these getting paid for? Because I love the credit card companies. I believe they're hugely convenient and I really use mine all the time. But are they giving us free rewards? How are the companies paying for this? Any guesses?
Get the interest.
Yeah.
Or fees, or if you have a fee to use the credit card.
Yep, absolutely. So there's 4 primary ways that interest companies get money. Credit card companies get money. It's interest, late fees, swipe fees, and selling our data. So interest and late fees, that's common. Everybody understands that. And the first 2 are totally optional. I don't pay interest or late fees. I am religious about paying my credit card bill. I have all sorts of reminders set up. I make sure I never do that. One of the reasons is the interest rate is insane. I have this nice cash back that I get at the end of the year, but the interest rate is insane. And that cash back will never compensate for the interest I would pay if I don't pay it off right away. So I don't pay it. Same with the late fee. I religiously make it on time. In the one case over the many years I've had this same credit card that something happened, I didn't get it paid on time. It was a fluke. I called them up, said, hey, this happened, explained the situation. They looked back at my account and said, yep, you're right. And we'll waive that fee. So the first 2, totally optional and you don't have to pay them, but it's a great income source. And that's why they want us to use their credit cards every time we have the opportunity. They also have the swipe fee. Every time you use your card, and I was asked by at UNI when I was doing that, it's called the swipe fee because every time when it came in fact, we were swiping our cards, but it applies even if it's a chip card, even if you pay online. Every time there's any transaction on a credit card, the credit card company gets a percentage of that transaction. And so they might be willing to give you 1 to 2% back, but they're also taking 3 to 4%. So they're gaining in the process. Now, over the last couple of years, the added income stream they have is selling our data. So they can culminate all of that data and then sell it to lots of other organizations. One example is the city of Ankeny a couple of years ago wanted to understand what the retail sales were in their area and how many people were driving to Ankeny to make purchases and how many people were actually leaving Ankeny to buy purchases. So basically, were there other amenities that we could have in our community that people were leaving our community to get? They got a wealth of information from the credit card companies. The consultant they hired just went to the credit card companies, got the data, and it was very clear that we had a lot of people leaving town to get certain things that they couldn't get in town. And then there were a lot of people from joining communities driving into town to get those. So the data itself, they're now estimating 25% of their revenue is coming just from selling our data. So when you think about what's in your wallet and you use it, I love my credit card, but we have to understand what they're getting out of it and who's actually paying for the rewards that we're getting. Of course, that's related to credit score. And this is one of the most bludgeoned conversations about credit score, but I see credit score as your financial reputation. It's essentially what it is. Just like you would protect your personal reputation, you need to protect your financial reputation because it will go with you where you go. The old, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. is true unless you can't pay the bill when it comes due. And then what happened in Vegas could actually be told through your credit score and through those. One of the things that, yes, it impacts interest rates and that, but it now also impacts your job. I know my old employer, they now check credit score. That's a big factor. Most importantly, to the average person, is the amount you're going to pay on things like insurance. So, Amy, since you were so bold and willing to answer a question earlier, I'm going to pick on you again, if you don't mind. Let's assume that you and I have the exact same driving record, the exact same car, everything about us is the same, and we go buy insurance for both our car and our house. But because you would manage your money so well, you have a rock star credit score, and I don't. We're going to assume that I have a poor credit score. The difference between what I will pay on my insurance for my car and my house and what you pay can be hundreds of dollars a year. It could even be more depending on the actual record and how low the score is. And that's the exact same insurance. The coverage doesn't change. I just have to pay a lot more for it because my credit score is low. So I don't like having a great credit score as some symbol of a status. It's more, it saves me money because when I go to buy insurance and a lot of those things that I just don't want to spend more on because it's the same either way, that's what's really worth managing your credit score over. And the vast majority of that score is made up by your payment history. Did you pay your bill on time and as expected? That's 35%. The other big chunk is 30% of how much you owe. So if I have a credit limit of $10,000, but I only use 1,000 of it, that's going to be in my favor. If I have a credit limit of 10,000 and I'm using 995 of it, then that goes against me. So if you keep the amount you use versus the amount of credit you have and make your payments on a regular basis as expected without being late, that's the vast majority of your score. Some of it is length of credit history. So keeping the credit there, having a long history with the existing with similar institutions, that helps. But the biggest part is pay it on time and don't use up all the credit that you're given. I'm going to take a quick sip. So we know that the areas that as Americans we get into the most financial trouble is our automobiles, our homes, and college spending. Automobiles, one of the biggest. It's scary, the statistics that show the number of people who are driving into a dealership ready to trade in and get their next vehicle, but they owe more on the vehicle they're driving in than it is currently worth. And a lot of dealers will say, no problem, we'll take care of that. And how they take care of that for you is they add that amount onto your new loan. Or somehow the price just gets higher, or they cover the financing, but the finance still and the interest rate you get is much worse. And sadly, automobiles have become so much about the technology that we are starting to upgrade more and more, and they're getting more and more expensive because they're full of computers. So that is one of the ways that we get in the most trouble. On top of that, it's become a status symbol. And a perfect example where the emotion drives a lot of this. So my car, I drive a Mazda. Mid-level, nothing that sexy. I did all the research, checked consumer reports. It's a really good model, not a lot of maintenance. That's my kind of car. Good fuel economy, all the things that you would expect to be part of a car purchase. The ads running at the time to promote this car, 30-second slot, only 5 seconds of that, did you actually see the car? The rest of it was this woman holding onto a red balloon floating through the clouds. And it had nothing to do with the car. It was selling this happiness that you would get when you drive the car. So again, emotions play a huge part in that. And yes, I want to feel very happy when I drive my car, but the vast majority of my drive I don't expect it to feel like I'm floating through the clouds. Homes, and I would actually, as the big gender brush that I'm going to wear, I know it doesn't apply to all, but guys tend to overspend more on their vehicles, and women tend to overspend or want to overspend more on their homes. Women, I know for me, I walk into a house, and if it checks all the boxes, I want it now, and I've already started figuring out where my furniture can go. And and even if the room isn't exactly how I want, I think, oh, well, I watch HGTV. I could just throw some paint on it and this will be perfect. That's where we get into a lot of trouble. College, there's a ton have been written about college and how much college debt is driving things. And of course, the more we say, hey, go to college, get a good job, the more college costs because they're competing against getting those college students. The one other common factor through these three things of cars, homes, and college is the fact that they're things we take loans out. Most of us are loaning money to do it. And so when we're doing that, it's, instead of thinking about the actual dollar amount, we think about what that monthly payment is. And if you take a price and put it over a lot of months, you can make it look small, even though you're paying a lot. Average car loan has extended by years. The average car loan used to be 3 to 5 years. Now they're going out to 7 years. So it's nice that you can spread it out, but that doesn't mean that you should be paying that much more. And goodness knows, for college, I know one of my daughter's friends, they sat her down when she was about to go into graduate school, and she got into one of the best graduate schools you could ever want in her profession. But she realized she was going to be paying $1,000 a month until she was 50. $1,000 a month until she's 50. Now, it might be the end for her. It was still worth it, but it might not be worth everybody. So we've got to look at what that payment's going to be and what it's going to look like, not only the day after, but when we go. One of the others I would say with these two, because you can tell by my title there, asset or liability, because when we are sold these or they are promoted, they are talking about investment. You invest in a new vehicle, in a home, and in a college degree, which is very true in some of that. Home, there's a good chance that history has shown us values go up. So that could be an investment, but we've also lived through 2008, so we know that it could go down as well. College, if it gets you a job that helps you pay that off and gives you better earning income, absolutely an investment. I would argue that unless you're collecting cars and you're rare and you have an expertise in cars and classic cars, a car is never an investment. It's a depreciating asset that will go down in value the minute you buy it, and it will continue to go down in value whether you drive it or not over the next few years. That is not an asset. That's not an investment. That's a tool you spend a lot of money on and hopefully can get a lot of use out of. So we talked about debt and loans, and that's pretty standard. We know you get some money now, like a mortgage, so you can buy that house, and you pay more later by the principal and the interest. But as somebody mentioned earlier, there's a ton of fees that get added onto those these days. You've got origination costs and other fees. And then we don't stay in the house that long. So then we move to another one and we've got more fees and fees and fees. More banks are getting income off of fees than they ever did before. So loans are good and can help us get what we need, but really watch the fees because that's a huge income stream these days for banks. So, and if they're getting it from somebody, let's hope it's not us. Want to switch gears and go into more what I consider fun is investing. Sadly, women's confidence level when it comes to investing is irrationally low. Irrationally low. Women's confidence compared to our male counterparts is really sadly low, and it's not justified by any evidence. So part of why I am working on this subject is to increase our confidence so that we can be building wealth more to protect ourselves. So this is just a snapshot of the S&P 500 over about a 12-year period. And I show this because it's a great example of something that happened years ago. Years ago, the Fidelity had a Magellan fund. This is just a mutual fund that happened to have an incredible track record. It gained 29% year over year for many years. It was amazing. Well, they assumed that the investors in that fund would be really happy with it. And so they dug into and did some research. And what they found is that the average investor who invested in this fund actually lost money. The average investor who invested in a fund that annually for year after year after year earned 29% lost money. How does that happen? It's the emotions. Emotions hijack those investors. And what would happen is the average investor would go, oh, the market's going up. I might get in. That was good last year. Maybe this year I'm going to put money in. And then as the market continues to go up, their confidence in investing goes up. And so that's it, I'm getting in. And they get in, and then the market goes up a little bit more. I'm a rock star, things are good. And it goes up a little bit more, and life is good. All right, I've done well. But then it goes down. And then it goes down even more. So in the dip you see in 2002, that was basically post 9/11. And then of course, we all know what happened in 08 and 09. And it was one thing for people as they got out, start going down, and they might be able to hold on for a little while, but then it goes down a little bit more. And then they start worrying about their job, and that gut check gets really tough, and they pull their money out. And what Fidelity found was those average investors did the opposite of what they all knew they should do. They bought high and sold low, even though the fund they invested in had great returns over the long time. So it goes back to that emotions. How do we manage our emotions so that we don't do what we know is contrary to our best benefit? So S&P 500, same thing. This is just over the longer haul. Now, the good news is that over the last 3 years, women's confidence and interest in investing has increased by about 50%. This is wonderful. What I'm worried about is that the market has been on a great incline, and it has been going up year after year over the last couple of years, which is great. I just hope that all those new income, those people who have been putting more money in as the market's been going up, have the intestinal fortitude to withstand another dip or two. It'll eventually happen. How severe it is, we don't know. But when it does, we have to watch that gut check. A good example, again, I was working for a financial institution in 08 and through 2012. In 08 and early 09, when things really got tough, one of the things they did was announce across the board salary decreases. It was a huge impact to everybody. And one of the easiest ways to help steady the ship a little bit was everybody took a salary decrease. Now they adjusted it. The lower income didn't take any adjustment, but the higher you went up on the pay scale, the bigger your cut was. I think it was the right move. They needed to make some significant changes, but that's a big gut check, not to mention watching, your 401k take a huge dive. And I knew the right things to do, but I still wanted to ever go, oh, but this might be different. Maybe I should pull it out. And my job had me, I was looking at all day long. I was seeing where my funds were, where the level was. And one day I literally wanted to puke in the garbage can underneath my desk. And I had logged into my 401k and checked the value, and I wanted to make a move. And I stopped myself and I'm like, okay, this is not what you should be doing. And I did the math. I'm like, okay, generally this is how much I put in over the years. And this is how many years I've been doing it. So this is how much I've actually put in. And the value today, while it's less, a lot less than what it was a couple months ago, it was still more than I had actually put in. And for me, that was my mental, okay, I'm okay. And I kept it in there. I left that firm company when I was in 2012. The market has done nothing but this nice increase since then. I am so grateful I had the intestinal fortitude to leave it in there, because it is sat. And even though I've left and haven't been able to contribute a dime since then, it's worth 3 times what it was when I left. So the beautiful thing is, it's because I didn't do anything. Just leaving it there, let it grow. One of the other reasons why finance is so tricky is because we don't talk about it, especially in the Midwest, but I think every part of the country says that same thing about their own region. We don't talk about it enough. And as Brene Brown says, the more we talk about something, the less power it has over us. One of the common questions I get when I go speak is talking about, how do I talk to, and then fill in the blank. How do I talk to my kids about money? How do I make them understand that I can't afford all of these things, or that they're not going to get a brand new car when they turn 16, or what have you? And even more importantly, right now I can cover all their expenses. How do I get them so that they can be managing money for themselves as they go off? Another common one, how do I talk to my parents? I'm worried about them. Will they have the income they need to manage as they get older? Will I need to help them? How do I have that conversation? They're really the old guard. They never talk about money. How do you have those conversations? And I don't have a magic wand for those conversations, but I have a few things to keep in mind if you're going to have conversations around this. One is understand that money and financial issues is a huge shame trigger. It's up there in the top 4. For women, it's up there with body shaming. So understand when you're having conversations and money's involved at all, there's a lot of emotion and sometimes, unfortunately, shame related to it. So with that, we have to judge less and care more. So more about not judging every decision or who drives what based on what we think that the price point might be for that, but judge less. The other that I find really helps is priority. What's my priority? No matter what the price is, if it's not a priority to me, I don't care. It could be really cheap. It's that, oh, it's the best deal ever. Well, if it's not a priority then to me, then no dollar amount matters. It's just not a priority. And I know a lot of people whose priorities are different from mine. And when we talk, it's like, great, I'm so happy for you that you just got X, buy the new boat or whatever it is. I'm happy for them. Then they say, oh, well, you should get one of these too. It's not a priority for me. I can be happy for you without making it a priority for me. And then the other is just listening to people, asking questions. Mom, Dad, how are things going? Have you thought about this? I know that, my friend is helping her parents with this. Do you need any of that? So it's a tricky conversation, but if you delve in, watch for the emotions, be careful of shame, and talk more about priorities. That's the other thing with my husband and I. We're both financially savvy. But when we talk about it, we come at it in a different way. Our priorities might be different as we approach a topic. So talking about that, I once made a recommendation on something and he was like, nope, not going to do it. I'm like, wait a minute, this is logical. I know your priorities are the same as mine. This should make perfect sense. Well, what he was hearing the day I happened to mention it was something he just went, you want to take money out of an account. Well, yes, that's true. I wanted to take money out of an account and I wanted to put it into another account. And there were very logical, sound reasons for taking money out of this account and putting it into this account. So I waited a few days, came back and said, So here's what I'm thinking, and here's why I'm thinking it, and here's the logic for why I think we should move this to here. And he's like, oh, well, that makes sense. Okay. All right. Well, so it's just sometimes it's how we approach the topic and not the actual the matter of the topic. So now one of the big questions, and then I'm going to ask one more question of you. And then if you have any questions, I want to take any of those. And my question for you is, what will you do with your economic power? We all have a lot of economic power. What will you do with it? Will you use it for giving, to help fortify your own stability, that of your families? But literally write it down. What are a couple things you want to do with your economic power? Maybe it's just shifting where you buy things because you believe in a company or the causes that they support. Anybody willing to share?
Yeah, I wrote down give more and spend more local.
Yes. Boy, those local organizations, a lot of them have survived because local people have continued to support them and are showing up for them.
Yeah, I feel like that's really held true since COVID hit. Everybody's really going to the local individuals, and I love it. So
yeah. And a lot of times you get some of the best stuff. So it's a double win.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? All right. Any questions?
I have a question. I think one of the biggest struggles that I have, especially where my girls are at, I have teenage, like mid, upper teenage girl ages, and it's trying to find that balance of saving for the future, but also having experiences now. And so I can think, okay, I've got this precious time with them, and I want to make sure that when it comes to trips or whatever we're doing, that we're making the most of that. But also then I think, someday, hopefully I'll have grandkids, and then I'll want to make the most of the experience of that. And how do you balance
that? That's a good question, but I think one, especially what we've learned and become very true over the last couple of years is we can have that time, but it doesn't have to be expensive. I live in Ankeny. The amount of pressure for a senior trip is insane. I was amazed. And even at really young ages, our kids in elementary were like, the neighbors, they're going to Walt Disney World for spring break. Why aren't we going there? And I would say, well, because we don't want to, and because we're going to the Wisconsin Dells instead. And that way we get to see grandpa and grandma on our way, and we can do this. And especially at the younger ages, what was great is we discovered it's kind of like they just wanted to stay at the hotel pool. Whether it was Orlando or Wisconsin Dells, they were at the pool. They really didn't care. So I think part of it, and as they get older, it gets trickier, but a big part is focus on the time. And then are there ways you can use that don't have to cost a lot? Or can you do something that it costs some, but not nearly, sometimes we try to show our love by how much we spend. Similar as senior pictures that I explained with my son, totally it. In that instance, I was trying to make up for the pictures I didn't take of him because he was the youngest. And of course I had a career and other things. So I didn't get as many pictures of him as I did my daughter when he was young. So I was going to try to make up for it. Now that has no basis in logic, but that's what I was trying to do. So look for ways that you can do both without having to spend. And honestly, I think the other thing about that is teaching kids in the process the value of money and how that plays out. One of the things that I've noticed is especially if you do take a trip, give them a set amount and say, this is what you have to spend while you're there. So if you want to buy the t-shirt or you want to go on that extra ride we're not doing or whatever it might be, here's the amount you can spend, and it's up to you and make that decision. And what I always found was they would be very thoughtful about how they spent that money because it was their money. So my son would come back from a trip with extra cash and he'd use it for something else and he'd hoard it away. My daughter, of course, she'd have it all spent, but it was theirs and they would spend it much more carefully. If it was just mom spending it, everything got thrown in the cart and they wanted it all. Same applies for jobs. I believe that kids should have jobs outside of the house. Part of that is you get some understanding of the world when you have a boss outside of your mom or dad. The other is if you have a check and it's in your name and you get to put it in the account with your name and it's your money, how you approach it and the lessons learned from that are very different. When it's just coming from mom, it was, that money tree they thought would just keep, if they whined enough, it would just keep coming. But if they had an actual job, earned their own money, those are life lessons that as a mom, I couldn't teach.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Any others?
I guess since we're asking about or talking about kids a bit, I've been seeing the advertisement. I just looked it up. Go Henry. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's like a debit card or a budgeting service. You teach your kids how to budget. I was just curious because I've always been on carry your cash, and this is how you learn how to spend it. But my kids are 11 and 8, so
Okay.
Not quite the teenage years, but I send them off with friends, whatever, and they have their money. And I know they're in this digital world though, and I probably should start embracing it with them. And I'm curious if you do know of any resources or if anyone else has used any, services like Go Henry, or if there's any other debit cards out there.
I'm not familiar with Go Henry, but I will look that up in a minute when we're done. Well, there's a couple things. One is I love the cash because when you're done, right? And that's one of the great things about it, especially also then you don't have a credit card laying out there, because I don't know about your kids, but my son and daughter periodically they would lose stuff. So it's one thing to lose a 20, it's another to lose a credit card. But there are some great secured credit cards that you can get. And basically what that is say it's a credit card and you go in and you put $500. So it's more like a debit card. You put $500 in the account and you use it just like you would any credit card, but it stops at $500. The limit is up to the amount of money you put on it. And it helps build a credit score. And then after a year or two, they might up your amount. But I really, especially for kids, I like to keep that limit to the amount they actually have in the account. And then it's another way, because again, there's a limit to it and they can be using it just digitally, but it's the same way. The other is these days, there's an easy online way. You can go in and look at your spending. Okay, well, you're out of money. What'd you spend your money on? Well, I don't know. Well, let's go check. You spent it at, the gift store. You spent it at the pizzeria, whatever it might be. There's a nice tracking tool. And I think the key is the opportunity to show them how they're managing it. And there's lots of different technologies, but the key is having limits, making sure that they know and work with them. And that will get kind of, some kind of crabby, because we all want to, push the limit, especially kids. That's what they're born to do. And as parents, we have to help them live within those limits and see how that works. Yeah, a secured debit card is a great way. Credit card is a great way to do that. Other accounts, as long as they understand the limits and then teach them to manage them, any of the technologies that allow that would work for that. The other thing, especially as young people and going off, one of the things I've heard a lot from kids going off to college, they're like helping with their budget and what they should plan for. And they're like, oh, well, literally I had one line and said, oh, well, that's covered by the student loan. So that doesn't, I don't have to worry about that. I'm like, well, but yes, it's covered by the student loan, but that just means you're going to pay for it later with even more because of the interest. And people had this notion of, oh, well, if it's covered by the loan, then it's like not really an expense. No, it's an expense. You just pay for it later. I also had one young person tell another person, well, who was graduating early, well, why would you do that? You're going to have to start paying your loans off early. I was like, well, yeah, but you're not incurring anymore either, nor are you incurring another year's worth of living expenses. And by graduating early, you actually get the income that goes with it, so you can start paying off the loan. So it's having the conversation after the conversation. Any others? Well, ladies, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to seeing what you all do with your economic power, because I know when we all use that to the benefit of ourselves and our families, we all get farther along. And I just believe the world would be better when we have more women who have the confidence and the understanding to manage their money well.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Joey. We appreciate it. Well, that's all we have for this morning. Stay tuned in the coming months for our 2022 schedule for the IGIA Women's Network. And thank you all for being here today. Have a great rest of your day, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.